There's actually reasons to feel better about KU long-term after their loss to Missouri. Also some reasons, though, that you might feel worse about them. We're going to break them all down, and what do we think it means for the future of the KU football season. We get to go to the game for the Missouri game and plenty more coming at you on today's Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day, and thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. And again, thank you to the everydayers who catch all our episodes, including our recap from the KU Missouri game, which you can still check out. On today's episode, we're talking our biggest takeaways from the game, including really the positives and negatives that you could look forward to the rest of the season for this team because of the game. We'll get to our goats of the game, good and bad, and an early look at West Virginia after KU has the bye week. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. So Kansas falls to Missouri 42-31, and I do think there's actually reasons you can feel better about the team for the long term, and there's reasons to point to feel kind of worse. I think honestly, overall for me, if I'm just adding a quick summation, I do feel I don't know that I'll say that I feel better about where the team is at, because you still did lose the game, and there are some things that could bother you later in the season. But I feel good about where the team is at in kind of a weird way. Like I almost feel validated that, yes, this is a good football team, but they're going to have to kind of figure some things out. Let's start with the positives to take away from the game, things to feel good about for the rest of the season if you're KU, even after the 11-point loss, because it was a game where, you had an opportunity to win. And I think that's kind of where I went. Like, you look at ESPN FPI, for instance, Missouri's now ranked 12th on ESPN FPI. And I don't know where Missouri is going to finish in turn. I mean, when you're playing in the SEC, it makes it difficult for, could you end up being the seventh best team, but that's, I don't know, the top 20 team in the country or something. I will say Missouri does have, like they avoid Georgia on the schedule, but you're looking at it. I mean, South Carolina, Alabama at home. The Alabama one might not be as tough as you expected. A&M, they get it home. Oklahoma, that'll be a tough one. And Auburn are on the road. I don't know. There's a chance that Missouri could end up winning 8 or 9 games, which if you win 8 or 9 games, maybe even 10, and if you win that many games in the SEC, you're going to be ranked really highly. You win 10, you're probably making the playoff out of the SEC. So point being, Missouri's a talented team. They're top 15 there. So you look at some of the estimations on Missouri coming into the year, some of the preseason prognostication, some of the preseason magazines, and a lot of them mention Missouri has a lot coming back on defense. This should be one of the best defenses in the country, but they have questions about the offense. What is the offense going to look like? Well, based on that game that I watched, I don't really have questions about the Missouri offense. They got some really good dudes as skill players, and I was really impressed with Bo Pribula. And, Caden Green, who made the move to left tackle, he didn't allow any pressures. He was really good for them. So I look at it and say, hey, Missouri is a good football team. I know that sounds horrible for me to admit, but they just are a good football team. And from that perspective, if you look at it and say, okay, Kansas's body of work right now, which is still just 3 games, is a close loss on the road to a good football team, and you beat Fresno State, who since that point has blasted Georgia Southern and then won on the road against Oregon State this past weekend. This Kansas team, I do think, is going to be pretty good when it's all said and done. And Missouri is as much, if not more talented than anybody else the KU is going to play in what is going to be the hardest environment KU will have played in this season. And you still competed and hung with them. Those are good signs moving forward. And again, if you're talking about the preseason magazines, loved Missouri's defense, but had questions about the offense, Kansas was able to score on that defense, right? So that's pretty impressive there. I also thought Jalon Daniels was good. Yes, there are probably throws that Jalon wants back. There's a couple deep balls that he just missed, but I've talked about this, but deep balls are fickle. You're going to hit some, like the Levi Wentz ones. You're going to miss others. You just want to be on the higher end of things. And obviously the interception at the end of the game, but with the score the way it is, you just have to kind of make things happen in those situations. if Emmanuel Henderson catches that pass, it's a different situation. He was the one who led the 92-yard touchdown drive. Again, he misses a pass to Daniel Highshaw a bit, and Highshaw probably could have caught it, but it was a bit astray. But then he immediately responds by throwing darts down the field to get him into the end zone. 92-yard touchdown drive. Jalen did enough for you to win this game. He was good in this game, and that makes me feel, because he had a good start to the year in his first 2 games, but this was the toughest contest and situation, and I thought he did everything. I mean, you had no running game, too. So it's like you were all reliant on Jalen in the passing game, and he did enough for you to have a chance in the fourth quarter to win that game. And that gives me even better feeling about the rest of the season, as long as Jalen can stay healthy, that you have that guy. I actually did think, like, if you look at the Pro Football Focus grades, it didn't like what KU did in pass blocking, 49 pass block, which I feel like that is low. I don't know, man. They give up 2 sacks to Missouri. I thought overall against a talented defensive line, like there were some plays where Kansas had a pocket, man. Jalen had time. Jalen had days to throw. And I thought it was actually a good pass blocking game for KU. Like, again, they're wasn't perfect, but I thought it was a decent game there. So I don't agree with that PFF grade, though I will say when we get to our GOATs, you'll see there actually were a decent amount of highly ranked individuals for KU. It was really just a couple guys kind of taking the grade, but still, point being there. And then I will say, like, as bad as it wasn't a good defensive game, obviously, you couldn't get a stop at the end of the game. You couldn't get a stop for really a majority of the game. But it didn't feel like you were helpless either. Like, I guess the best way of me describing it would be you go to like the 2022 game against Arkansas in the Liberty Bowl. It felt like you were helpless on defense in that game. Like you were never going to stop them. You think back to some of these games, like that Oklahoma game in 2020. Would that have been 2022 as well? Yeah, I think that was 2022 as well. There have been some games that KU has played where, heck, the Baylor game at the end of last year, where it just felt impossible for KU to get a stop. And it felt that way when KU was punting away at the end of the game at that point. But to that point, even with Missouri scoring the 42, it still felt like KU made some plays. You know what I mean? It felt like they at least had some moments. And that at least is encouraging to me, that it wasn't just it took Bo Pribula having an excellent game. And even in the throws that were tighter windows, he was pinpoint accurate. It took them making a couple like contested grabs on 3rd or 4th downs. The linebacker core to me is legit. The defensive line had flash plays. So is this going to be a top 30 defense in the country? No, it's not. But I still actually do believe this is going to be the best defense of the Lance Leipold era. And I saw enough there that was like, okay, you have a young secondary. They're giving up some stuff. They're making some plays. Later in the season, I think some of that stuff's going to be even better for KU. Now, some of the things you feel worse about, I mean, in general, being 0-5 in rivalry games, hard not to feel worse about that. And just puts even more pressure on winning the K-State game, especially with K-State's struggles early in the year. I think the game management stuff and the close game issues, like those feel like at this point they're not getting fixed. And I was trying to think about this more over the weekend. Lance Leipold for so many years was cutting his teeth as the coach at a Division III school where he ended up turning them into a powerhouse and made them the best team in the country. And so when you are the best team in the country, you probably do want to play a more conservative style of football because you are forcing the other school to play their A-plus game, and the other school playing their A-plus game still might not be enough. So like that conservative approach, that can work if you're at the best school in the country. If you're out of Georgia, if you are Nick Saban at Alabama, you still got to mix stuff in nowadays, but that can work a little bit better. It doesn't work as well when you're at Kansas because you have to win on the margins and you're not the most talented team in the country. And so that's where it's frustrating, but also you have a coach who's in his 60s here. That approach isn't going to change. And it does feel like it limits KU's ceiling. Then again, I think about it, and I think about a guy like Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, and Iowa is as conservative as they come with their approach there, and they have some seasons every now and then with Kirk Ferentz where they win 10 games. Then again, maybe that's in the past, and maybe with how heavily analytics factors into stuff now, that's going by the wayside at this point. But it definitely felt like Missouri had the talent advantage. It felt like KU out executed them for a little bit of the game and at moments of the game and was going to find a way to win. And KU still did have, talent at certain positions, but it felt like Eli Drinkwitz coached the game like Lance Leipold should have coached. And I do there is a part of me that wonders if Missouri's kicker isn't hurt coming into the game, would that have actually been a net positive for KU given what Missouri ended up doing on some of those 4th down plays? I don't know, but it's something where it's like KU should get more aggressive, but I just don't think they're going to. And that scares me for the rest of the team, because it basically means that your one score record, like maybe you'll get back to being 500 in one score games the rest of the way, but like you're never going to be just an elite team in one score games playing like that, in my opinion, with where Kansas is at. What if KU just sucks at running the ball? That's a little bit of a worry. Now, it wasn't an issue for the Fresno State game, but it also didn't feel like you just completely gashed them. I do think Kansas really misses Devin Neal and his vision. I think that's something that they're definitely missing on this year's team. But that's going to be an interesting one of what they can do running the ball in Big 12 play. I also will say, like, something you might feel worse about, you were out-yarded by like 300 yards. So was it actually a bit of a mirage that you were even as close as you were? I lean toward not thinking that way, because, again, you think of like having a defensive touchdown, that just inherently is going to take away the ability for you to get yards. If you call a more aggressive game at the end of the first half, like you should have, if you catch that Emmanuel Henderson pass, if you make a stop on one of the fourth downs, that they would get like 100 less yards, you would be getting more yards kind of in return. So there's ways that you can kind of flip around that in both directions. But I will also say this, one other worry that I think I have for this team, and this would be kind of a big picture matchup thing. I think when you look at it, because I think about this team, Missouri, a very athletic team. I think about last year. Who were the two teams that beat Kansas the most handedly, I guess? The two teams that beat Kansas the most handedly last year, it was TCU, which you still led that one in like the late third quarter, but TCU won that game by 11 points. Most of KU's losses were one score. And the other one you lost most handedly was Baylor. Those were arguably the two most athletic teams you played on your schedule last year, and you lost both. Speed and athleticism, that's kind of the Achilles heel for you for Kansas. So when you look at the rest of the schedule for KU, the good news is you don't play TCU or Baylor this season. Now, maybe you would say Texas Tech, maybe you'd say UCF, but UCF might just not be very good overall to be able to take advantage of that. So I don't know that you're going to play a team as athletic as Missouri, except maybe Texas Tech. That would be the only one you look at. Like Utah might end up being a better team than Missouri or as good as Missouri. But that's a little bit different in how they get it done. Theirs is more like brute force and strength and how they do it. So I do find that a little interesting as we look to future games and prognosticating for KU. Are they playing a really fast and athletic team? That might be advantage for the other team in a lot of ways. All right, let's get to our goats of the game next. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of LOJ is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Needs parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery. It's just an absolute game changer. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's SHCollege5, 5% off your first order. Supplyhouse.com, real people, real service. Today's episode of the show is also brought to you by Game Time. College football's back, and the tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, just nothing like it, man. We're about to get into fall weather, too, where, oh, man, just the crisp fall weather in the air. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like a little bit more of a battle than the game itself sometimes, especially, you go in, you think you got the tickets for a pretty good deal, and then all of a sudden you get to the checkout, and it's like pop-up of ticket fees and all these things that you're like, wait, what? Why do I have to pay this? What is this that I'm paying for? And it feels like some of that stuff can end up being like more expensive than the ticket itself. Well, Game Time takes the hassle out of the ticket buying from that situation, because with Game Time, you have the ability to toggle on the ticket fees. So you're not getting surprised at checkout. You see it up front. They've zone deals too, where you can pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, and make Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Don't forget to make Locked On College Football your second listen every day as well. So goats of the game. If you're new to the segment, we get our good goats, good iteration of the word, the newer age, the greatest of all time. Bad goats is kind of the old iteration. You know, when I was growing up, being a goat was bad. It was like the sacrificial goat, I guess, so to speak. Okay, good goats. Let's start there for KU. Like I said, I thought Jalon Daniels had a good game. I know there were a few missed passes here or there, but like, come on, guys aren't going to go 20 of 20 for the game. And overall, if you look at the 20 plus yards down the field, he went 3 for 6 for the game. You know, most guys are completing, like the good ones are completing like 40% of passes that far down the field. So I thought it was a good game from Jalon Daniels. He did enough for you to win the game. And again, if Emmanuel Henderson catches that pass, who knows? Maybe they engineer a 4-minute touchdown drive that doesn't leave Missouri enough time and Kansas wins 38-35, right? Like that would have been entirely possible. So I was impressed with Jalon in the game overall for KU. Deshaun Hanukkah gets a good goat here for KU. He a couple touchdowns. Like, it's amazing to me coming off the injury that he had, how effective he has been already in the early part of the season. It doesn't seem like he's shaken much rust off. In fact, actually in Pro Football Focus, there's only one KU offensive player who's graded a 70 or above. That seems a little not right. But anyway, 88.4 is the grade for Hanukkah there on that one. Our next good goat is Jim Zebrowski. I thought he called a really good game. I didn't necessarily love I think it was the first drive of the game. We get to 3rd and 1 and Kansas runs a shotgun run with Highshaw. That I wasn't really a fan of, especially when you'd have questions on the offensive line. Now, to Zebrowski's credit, he didn't know at the time just how bad the rushing game was going to be for KU. But I think from then on, like, I thought it was a really good game called by Jim Zebrowski overall, you know? And if you want to argue that, they should have been more aggressive at the end of the half, like, I don't think that's a Jim Zebrowski call, you know? I think the argument there for the end of half would be, I guess you could say, why are you doing an outside run with Highshaw? But I don't know if Highshaw just bounced that there himself or what kind of happened on that play. But yeah, man, I thought overall, like, Zebrowski called a really good game for KU to deal with, the defensive line for Missouri and not have it just completely take over the game in the passing game like it did in the rushing game. And you basically are at a point, if you're Zebrowski, where you're not getting anything from the run game. You do become more one-dimensional, and you still cause problems for Missouri to stop you, even though you were more one-dimensional. Defensively, for the good goats here, Blake Harreld had the highest PFF grade for a KU defender, 77.5. He had a 75 tackle, and he wound up with 4 tackles for the game. Played a lot of snaps, 49 snaps for KU. They're playing a lot of these 3D tackle looks, is KU, which I found interesting with DK McDonald. Get your good talent on the field, and KU certainly has a lot of talent in D-tackle. I also thought Tommy Dunn, I said this, I think, last week, it feels like just every week we're going to get like a different D-tackle or two that kind of breaks out, so to speak, or has like a flash level performance. And it felt like it was Harold and Tommy Dunn in this one. Dunn at a 73.6 PFF grade, 81 in pass rush. He had 4 pressures. Really good pass rush game for Tommy Dunn. So that was good to see. And yeah, he definitely flashed in this one for KU. Leroy Harris, speaking of pass rush, Leroy Harris also had 4 pressures. He wound up with just a 63 PFF grade, 67 in pass rush. I don't know how you get a 67 when you have 4 pressures. That seems kind of ridiculous there. But yeah, man, Leroy Harris definitely flashed. I think KU got a steal in that youngster who's really, really good already. Trey Lathan gets a good goat for KU. He finished with a 75.4 PFF grade. He racked up double-digit tackles for the day for KU. And in a day where KU missed a lot of tackles, he had a 13% missed tackle rate, which actually is on the better side of things. So yeah, Trey Lathan continues to really produce for KU. That was a big-time addition from the portal out of West Virginia there. And then overall, I was impressed with the linebackers, and I was impressed with the toughness of Bengali Kamara. I'll just put Bengali Kamara minus the missed tackles, because I thought Bengali Kamara played a good game. I mean, he had a 74 coverage grade on PFF. He had a 62 overall grade, though, and you're like, okay, he had 9-10 tackles for the game. He had a good coverage game. Why did he only have a 62 PFF grade? It's because he missed 4 tackles for the game. So there's your reason why that was the case. But you're also playing injured. I thought Bengali Kamara overall was really good, and then you add to it the gritting through the injury. Good goat for Bengali Kamara. He just missed I just wish maybe one or two less missed tackles there. The bad goats of the game management. We've discussed that ad nauseum, so no need to get much further into that. The KU running game in general, I mean, you can put a lot of blame to it, just kind of gets divvied out here, right? The offensive line struggled in run blocking for KU. This was their worst run blocking game of the season. I'd have to go back and look, but probably one of their worst run blocking games, I don't know, the last couple of years, certainly. The only player who had above a 61 run block rate on PFF was Emmanuel Henderson, who continues to be a really good run blocker for a receiver. But KU had 4 offensive linemen who were below a 55 in run blocking. That's not good. And at the same point in time, KU didn't do themselves any favors with, like I said earlier, I think you missed Devin Neal's vision, but also you missed Devin Neal's ability to constantly fall forward. It felt like Missouri had that in this game. It felt like Missouri had plays where, okay, it feels like you're going to limit them to 0 yards, they pick up 2 or 3. It feels like you're going to limit them to 4 yards, they pick up 6. And Devin Neal was so good at doing that, finding the hidden yards for KU. And this is actually really interesting. KU averaged 1.3 offensive line rush yards. Missouri averaged 1.7. That basically means the amount of rush yards they were averaging before getting contacted. Missouri's was better than KU's, but by less than half a yard. That means that a majority of the big difference in the running, yardage overall was actually done by just the Jimmies and the Joes more than the offensive linemen and the X's and O's, I guess, so to speak. So I do think that was a big advantage for Missouri in this game, and KU needs to get more out of Daniel Highshaw and LaShawn Williams just moving forward. They want to run the football. You got to take advantage of that. So that wasn't great for KU. Also bad, not a good game for Calvin Clements and Bryce Foster, which is unfortunate because we come into this one being like, okay, how is the offensive line going to perform for KU? What about the guys who are rotating in at guard and tackle? And it actually wound up being the guys you were counting to be pillars who had the biggest struggles, because actually KU had 5 offensive linemen who were 70 or better in pass blocking. The only 2 who weren't were Clements and Foster, and both of them rated very low on that pass block grade. It was a 9.1 pass block grade for Calvin Clements, who had a 30 overall grade. Bryce Foster only a 38.7 in pass blocks. So that was really rough for KU there. They didn't necessarily expect that. Missed tackles for KU. Overall 24 missed tackles for Kansas. They had 14 from the secondary. So while the young secondary is talented, not totally secure in tackling yet, and that was an issue for KU. They missed 12 total tackles in their first 2 games combined. The secondary missed more than that in this one game, and overall Kansas missed double that as a team in this one game with 24. So that was not great for KU. Obviously, it becomes harder when you're playing a team who has good skill players who make you miss, but Kansas needed a more secure tackling game in this one, and they didn't get it. I'm tempted to say pass defense overall and coverage, but I don't know, man. There were a few plays, a few catches that Mizzou, that it was just a good athlete making a play or a pinpoint accurate throw from the quarterback dropping it into a bucket. It certainly wasn't a good game, but I'm not going to bad goat it either. I guess the proper thing that I would say here would say pass defense, specifically on 3rd and 4th down. Did you know KU had a smaller 3rd down and distance average, and their stop rate was 22%. Missouri's was at 24%, so not that much of a difference there. KU also created one more havoc play, had more tackles for loss and sacks, but on late downs, Missouri had 15 successful plays, Kansas had 5. So Kansas actually was holding up on 1st and 2nd down comparatively. It was those 3rd and 4th down plays that wound up being the difference. Let's finish up. Early look at West Virginia. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the show, and today's episode of Locked on Jayhawks is brought to you by the Game Cap. If you're a college football fan out there and you could go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? You might have a lot to choose from. I might be wondering, would you be wearing the game hat? Boom, right here. You got your KU hat. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. They're not just hats. They're the same vintage styles the fans wore back in the 80s and the 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same price they did back then. When you use code LOCKED ON, vintage hat for $16.99. So you get that I guess old KU script on there. Again, vintage hat for $16.99 when you use the code LOCKED ON. That is thegamecaps.com, thegamecaps.com. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design and use code LOCKED ON for an exclusive discount, because legends wear the game. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks and making it your first listen every day. So an early look at KU's next opponent. First of all, they'll have the bye week. That's probably going to come in handy after a physical and emotional game against West Virginia. It also is going to be helpful for the guys who are banged up. Obviously, you think of Bengali Kamara trying to play through stuff. You think about the guys who maybe didn't play or, warmed up at the very least. Like, it's going to be very helpful for KU right before the start of Big 12 play. So West Virginia is 1-1. They blew out their FCS opponent, Robert Morris, 45-3. They just lost to Ohio. Now, Ohio's a pretty good team. 17-10, though, is the score. The interesting thing is KU plays Pitt, who is their biggest rival. And that becomes interesting because while Kansas has the bye week to move off emotionally from their rival, West Virginia does not. That makes it very difficult for them in terms of like getting up high, coming down low, all those sorts of things. So that'll be very interesting. Now, Jaheim White has been a really electric runner for them. I thought I saw he got hurt in the Ohio game. And so I think he's injured, and I don't know if he's supposed to be out for the year, but I'm pretty sure it's a bad injury. So that obviously hurts them coming into it. So you look at West Virginia, they're a team under Rich Rod, which you typically think is going to be running the football, going to be running, read option, speed option, triple option type of stuff. So far this year, they are 126th in total EPA passing, but they're 36th in rushing. So it's going to be key for KU to stop the run. Defensively, West Virginia has been really good to start this year, though. They're top 10 in EPA against the pass, top 30 against the run. Again, a little bit of a schedule help for those two things. We'll learn more in the Pittsburgh game. But point being, this is a game that is a winnable one for KU. And you need to bounce back after the Missouri game, right? If you want to be back to being a bowl team, if you want to be a team that, this is a new season now, right? You're starting Big 12 play. You want to contend for the Big 12, you win a game at home like this against West Virginia. But it's not going to be easy because we've seen it. Last year, KU loses to West Virginia. A couple years ago, you win, but it's a very close game in Morgantown. And so that's going to be the nature of the beast in the Big 12. You're going to have to win close games. You're going to have to figure out winning those close games. Are they going to be able to do it against West Virginia in Lawrence in a couple weeks? That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. And we'll see you next time for another edition of LOJ.